Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another week, another dispatch. Happy Father's Day to all of you fathers out there. If you're not a father, happy Father's Day to everybody. Funny weather over here. Anyway, I'm going to change my glasses so that I can read. I can read with these, just not as easily. Anyway, I want to carry on with Andrew Forge, the conversation between Sarah Sands and Andrew Forge. So, we last left off with I think what so really what I am saying, I think, is that I want my paintings to be the sum of very many, almost beyond counting, individual decisions, each one of which I bring as much energy to bear on as I can. I spoke a little bit about this energy thing, the energy we bring to bear. Sarah says, given that, we're recording, yes, and we're audible, yes, all of it. Okay, given that, could you talk a little about how the paintings evolve? You state elsewhere that the paintings start with a single dot and then move out from there. Has that procedure changed at all? Andrew. Yes, it has a bit, because I've simply learned more about it. I've been doing it for a hell of a long time, since the mid-60s, working with dots, and inevitably, it has changed. On the whole now, when I start a painting, I tend to, rather on the analogy of stringing a loom, I tend to lay out dots right across the canvas so that at the end of the day, I've got some sort of a warp and a woof, so to speak, that's spread right across the canvas. But of course, they're not very close together. They're spaced, depending on the size of the canvas, spaced maybe 4 inches apart. You can't yet begin to see how the color is going to work. There's far more white than there is paint. And as anybody knows, walking across a snowy field, any foreign object looks dark against the snow. Any brush stroke of paint, whatever the color, looks like an accent of dark against the virgin white of the canvas. And so the color that the painting is going to begin to give back to me is something way over the horizon. I have no idea yet. However carefully I figure out the palette that I'm going to use, no real sense of what kind of color it's going to give back to me. And that won't come until the ratio between the dots and the white has passed a certain point. And then one's eye begins to pick up not just a quality of a particular color, but how it is playing against another color. And it would be forced to call that chance, but it is certainly playing with the unknown in the sense that I know that something will happen at some point in the future, but I don't know quite what it's going to be. Sarah. But the structures that emerge in the paintings aren't pre-planned? Andrew. Oh no, not at all. No, they're not. I mean, one of the real rules that I try to adhere to, as strong as I can, is that whatever structure comes out of the canvas has to be, in a way, a fulfillment of something that the dots already fortuitously began to suggest. You need to, if you haven't, take a look. I mean, I'll put some into the email, but and there's one in the PDF, but go online so you can see like the sense of structure that appears. And I say fortuitously because if I painted like a craftsman, there wouldn't be much that was fortuitous. But I can't pretend that I paint like a craftsman because I get bored and I change the rhythm and I get interested in a particular kind of vibration, and I try to enhance it. One's mind is blank while putting them on. One is continually looking at the rhythms that are developing on the canvas and responding to them. And over a period of time, these irregularities begin to make suggestions, whether linear suggestions, spatial suggestions. And then as time goes on, those suggestions are either picked up on or suppressed. And if they are picked up on, they tend to become dramatized. Like if there is a row, I might perhaps rule a line along it to see what would that look like, to see what that would look like. But on that subject, I really treasure that remark of Art Tatum's that you said to me yesterday, that there is no such thing as a wrong note. It all depends on the note you play after. That goes right to my heart. Sarah, I often think of the terms making and finding from Richard Schiff's book on Cezanne, where a made process sets up the context for a rich finding of structures. There's a book by Richard Schiff, Cezanne and the End of Impressionism, I think. And the last chapter is about Cezanne's invention of a process. And Schiff calls the chapter, titles it, Making a Find. Great piece of writing. Okay, la la la. There's that play between conscious making, setting up parameters, but also never quite being able to predict Andrew. But that's it. You see, I really can't imagine that anything to do with painting can have any sort of meaning at all until the person who's doing it has agreed with himself or herself about certain rules. And by rules, I mean simply, if this, then that. There is some sort of logic that follows from the attitude that you've adopted, some kind of consequence from moment to moment, time to time. Think of somebody as far away as you can from a constructivist. Think of Soutine. You might say, well, he's not following rules such that any constructivist would recognize. Right? The constructivists, say those Russian abstract painters in the early 20th century. But of course, he's following rules. The primary rule that he was related to was the problem of painting in front of something. And if you know anything about Soutine's life, you know that he drove people crazy with looking for exactly the right thing to paint. So he was precisely as truthful and dedicated to his own rule structure as the most rigorous constructivist. And I think that the whole problem of discovering what kind of painter you are, which is, in our day and age, the problem, is connected with finding out what rules give you that framework of meaning, but at the same time, provide you with a degree of freedom and unpredictability that allows you to breathe. So good. Sarah, a couple of statements ago, you brought up meaning, which is Andrew, laughing, a big word. Sarah, and it's almost a prosaic question. But how do you think of your paintings in terms of content and meaning? Andrew, very long silence, then laughing. Yeah, perhaps I should have steered clear of that word. Well, of course, if you are talking about any kind of art, I think forget about meaning unless you're prepared to talk about it on many, many different levels. I suppose at the most basic level of all, there's an act of faith. And the act of faith consists simply of this, that if I do something with all my will and all my concentration, I'm saying all like that because it's all in capitals. If I do something with all my will and all my concentration, even if it's just putting down the tiniest mark, that if I really truly mean it with all of myself, all my strength, then I believe that it will mean something. So in a way, that's the sort of root of the thing. But then moving on from that, there are the interests that a particular individual might have. And in that regard, there are, as far as I am concerned, two things that perhaps I can put into words. Two more levels, if you like. One is the choice of the colors that I use. And that is where the figurative painter in me is still very, very much alive, and where my impulse to start a painting is always, I think I can say always, the result of having seen something, a thing, perhaps a group of things, a light, a sense of place, a time of day, that in the end focuses down to particular colors and how I would make them, almost how I would copy them. Look at a tree trunk on a winter's day, a particularly strange kind of cool, greeny gray of bark against the emerald green of winter grass, or something like that. And I begin thinking about pigments. I begin, well, raw umber with a tiny bit of cadmium yellow pale, maybe worth trying. Just thinking when I am walking about, looking at things, and sooner or later I want to actually start finding colors on the palette, putting them side by side. And quite an important moment before the painting, it's the only sort of preparation I make, really, is I get those strips of paper and I just put colors down alongside each other, and I develop some sort of sense of how they are going to fire off against each other, so that every painting has a specific color. I think of it as a color meaning that relates to desire, a desire that I felt. And desire is an important word because I think one does paint out of desire in the end. So there's that. Then, on a rather different level, I'm just tremendously interested in what happens when the mind construes what it sees. I'm quoting myself here, but for 1,000 reasons that I don't want to get into, I've lost interest in representation as far as my own capacities are concerned. On the other hand, I am extremely interested in recognition and how the eye looks at things and tries to make sense of them. And also how that process of looking seems in a very mysterious and labile sort of way always to take a different course, and becomes involved in naming, in attaching words to sensations. And I suppose that I would want to claim that one level of the meaning of my paintings is that they present the eye with problems in recognition and of self-awareness. I mean, in the sense that I would like to think that an ideal viewer of my painting asks, what am I seeing? At a certain point, and then works at it. He was wonderful. Just gotta say, he was. Anyway, read anything you can find that he's written. And if you're in New York, go to the Betty Cunningham Gallery. Lower East Side. Look at his work. Yeah, okay. What a time. So let us find meaning in our work. One of the gifts of painting. They offer that, the paintings. It offers that meaning, actually. All right. I'll stop. Uh, keep on making stuff. Keep drawing. Keep painting. I'll go paint. We had a nice week. We're outside, and I did some painting. I got to go back to the spots and do more. I mean, they're not. It's like all mush right now, but it was like, oh yeah, it's nice to be outside and paint. Okay, everybody, hang in there. Take care. Bye.